Alright, welcome to our quick review of the multiple nuclei model. It's the third North American city model that we're going to talk about, and it's also the most recently created. The slides were designed to accompany the book People, Places, and Culture, and I am, of course, Ms. Gall, I'll be your host for the review. So, when we're talking about the multiple nuclei model, you need to recognize it both by the name multiple nuclei model, but you also need to recognize it by the Harris and Ullman model. And the whole goal of this model really is to recognize that as cities have evolved and grown throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, that central business district, that kind of downtown area, has slowly but surely lost its dominant position as the single nucleus, or really the single focus of a given urban area. And it's lost that focus to other industrial areas, other economic areas, but also increasingly to suburbs and slowly but surely to what are developing many areas called edge cities, which are suburban downtowns that develop oftentimes around things like big regional shopping centers. They tend to attract industrial parks, office complexes, hotels, restaurants, entertainment facilities, sports stadiums, but really, most importantly, they develop kind of on the edges of our major urban areas. And what they do is they pull out some of those, particularly the highly paid workers who want the advantages of living in the suburbs while gaining access to the city. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're going to talk about the multiple nuclei model, and then I'll recap a little bit, talk a little more about edge cities. Okay, so you need to recognize this model when you see it. Okay, you'll never need to draw it. You should draw it into your notes. Pause the video and draw it into your notes so that you got it, and that act of drawing will help you remember it. Again, got to recognize this Harris and Ullman. Got to recognize multiple nuclei model. Like all of our other city models, we've got a central business district. In this case, it's blue. Okay. And then we've also got areas that are dedicated to different types of manufacturing or industry, and areas that are dedicated to residential. So our manufacturing areas, right, we've got the dark orange one, which is like light manufacturing. We've got our light blue one down there at the bottom. That's the heavy manufacturing. Okay. And then we've also got our residential areas. So our low-class residential, not surprisingly, if you've watched the other two, clustered around manufacturing areas, also around that historic downtown. We've got kind of our medium class or our middle class residential, which is also near some of those poorer areas. It's not as close to the actual manufacturing, but does loop a little bit around downtown. And then in between our high class, which is the light purple, kind of the lavender color, and our middle class, our green, we've also got, there's kind of an outlying business district. This might be a mall or something similar, or a series of strip malls that kind of marks off that area that helps with that transition. And we've also got, and this is a big difference with this model, not only is it crazy to try and draw, but it's also got some different suburbs. So it's got the light green, kind of the seafoam green down there in the bottom right, that's a residential suburb. So when we say residential suburb, that's a place where it's mostly houses. There's some small businesses and things like that, but it's not a place where you're going to go find a whole bunch of big businesses, right? I was on Vashon Island not too long ago, and that's kind of the stereotype of the residential suburb. As we were driving around to get to this house we were going to, you could see a reasonable chunk of small businesses, but most of what we saw when we were on there were houses. It was a residential area predominantly. Okay, then we've got the dark gray up at the top. That's an industrial suburb, and that's different because that's based around businesses. And it's not that there aren't houses and things there, but it's mostly or primarily based around industry or businesses. Okay, so those are some of the different types of suburbs. And if we were going to talk about edge cities, Okay, the area where we find that edge city is probably really that kind of outlying business area right around kind of that transition between our wealthy and our middle class folks. So it's really kind of this area that's edge cities tend to be wealthier. They tend to be more spread out, very suburban. Okay, kind of the classic edge city and the one that's used as the model for what an edge city is Tyson's Corner, Virginia. So you should actually recognize when you hear edge city, you should know that Tyson's Corner is the example of that, right? And it's developed as kind of a major edge city and got its start with some folks who wanted to kind of get away from Washington, D.C., right? And so what they did was they moved their business out where the land was cheaper, and then with that then pulled out the executives, and with the executives we've got the services and things like that that cater to those executives, and slowly but surely we've got a town that builds up on the edge of a much larger city. Okay, that kind of builds up around that. So this has been our quick discussion of edge cities and also of the multiple nuclei model. With the multiple nuclei model, you need to remember multiple nuclei model. You need to know Harris and Ullman multiple nuclei model. You need to recognize it when you see it. Know that it's got those same basic components that we talked about with the other city models. It's got a CBD. It's got some industrial or some manufacturing areas, and it's also got residential areas, and in North America those are very definitely split by social class and by essentially the value of the land underneath the property. Okay. And then know that the multiple nuclei model is called that because just like in biology class, the nucleus is kind of the center of the cell. What this model has that's different is multiple centers. So it's got multiple business districts, okay, which is what then leads into that discussion of edge cities, because edge cities develop as one of those outlying business districts on the, wait for it, edge of the city. That's why they're called edge cities, because they're on the edge of the city. So if you have any questions about either of these two concepts, I'd invite you to bring them into class and come see me, and I'll answer any questions I can.